Hey, everybody.
Hey!
Hey!
Trying new features that we can use for the live streams. Hopefully people like the music.
That music was made by Vanan.
Yeah, Canadian Herpetoculture. So he gave us rights to use his music for our intros, outros, and now for this. So today we're going to go over bettering the hobby in the public view. And today I got Danaa with Ophidians by Design. We got Chris with Crown Pythons. And the two regulars that you know.
It's me. It's your girl. And Brandon's your boy. Sorry about your luck.
So yeah, it seems lately there's been a lot of bad things happening wise in the public eye with media and stuff because
tons of ball pythons are getting dumped in public parks because people are dumb.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, and that doesn't make the hobby look good. But that's also not like breeders dumping shit out there.
No,
that's usually just Joe Blow who bought 4 snakes because he thought they were cool, and now all of a sudden he can't pay for them, or they just won't sell, so he just decides to dump them because he doesn't want to give them away.
Because people look at them as a novelty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're pretty much just like, hey, look at me, I got snakes, so never mind. I don't want these anymore because I can't afford them.
Oh, yeah, like, come on. I think probably every, shitty person I ever met in my life had a boa or a ball python that was, like, half-starved and covered in shed in their living room. Like...
Yeah.
And those are the animals that are just getting dumped.
Yeah, because the people that breed these animals actually care for the animals and they want to see them do well. They don't just dump animals out because this does not fit into my breeding plans. They usually try to find a home for them.
Well, yeah, you see more people like more breeders saying, they're like looking for pet only homes.
Yeah.
For the animals that have like issues or whatever.
Yeah, it might not be
it.
a good breeding animal, so they kind of call it out of the breeding colony, which culling does not necessarily mean kill. Sometimes it means rehoming to a pet only home. So somebody that's still going to enjoy that animal and is still going to have a good life.
Exactly. So, don't dump your ball pythons or any other reptile anywhere in any park ever.
Yeah, they're not going to live. They're not going to have a quality of life being out in the wild because they don't come from here.
Well, and even if they do, if they've been bred in captivity for generations and generations, how well do you think that an animal's going to do in the wild when it's only ever known 4 walls?
The same can be said for domesticated cats and dogs. That's the biggest argument I see between reptiles and why they don't belong in captivity versus cats and dogs. Well, if you go and take a Yorkie and dump it in the middle of the forest, wherever, you really think it's going to survive?
Oh, yeah, like...
It's going to turn into poop.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing about even small breeds like that, like, they were actually bred to hunt vermin, but, like, good luck. Without ever having that training and actually knowing what to do?
Yeah.
How many of those animals do you think are going to be successful? Like, you see starving dogs that have been on the street forever, getting rescued all the time. Clearly, they're not fucking doing well.
No.
You're held to a different standard than every other pet trade, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you see a post on Facebook about a dog getting out of the yard and it's running free and terrorizing the neighborhood.
Oh, and
everybody's desperate to go out and save this dog and take it home.
Yeah.
You find a ball python in the park and suddenly we're all the devil.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Send the military, quick, there's a snake in the park.
Yeah. Yeah, we're held to a way different standard than dogs and cats because dogs and cats are cute and fuzzy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But beyond that...
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was going to say beyond that, the hobby is its own worst enemy here because as soon as a ball python or a boa gets loose in a park, it's released, it escaped, whatever happened, whatever the story is, somebody posts it online, and there's dozens of people jumping down everybody's throats about it's bad breeders, and we should take them away from these people, and these guys are picking a fight amongst ourselves when we've already got enough to deal with outside of the community.
Well, yeah,
and we've already got
exactly.
everybody else looking down on us, and they start looking down on us because they're idiots.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
hobby,
people that aren't even like actively doing anything in the hobby to better it that are shitting on everybody else.
Yeah, and those people who are like, "Oh, you guys are so bad," and you making us all look bad. Those people aren't putting the effort forward to change things or help or organize things either. So that doesn't help at all because you're just demonizing everybody as a whole. And that doesn't help us better the hobby and community, because if we don't work together, we're not going to move forward in a good direction.
Absolutely.
Hear, hear.
Well, I mean, like, we're talking about bettering the hobby in the eyes of the general public. And the thing is what people forget is every time you post something online, every time you comment, every time you post a picture, a video, whatever, you are essentially speaking for the entire hobby.
Yeah.
Because if someone sees that and it is bad, like live feeding videos, there's not really a reason to put up live feeding videos. We know they eat. They look horrible to the outside population.
Yep.
If you're going to post up horrible crap, someone is going to see it and they're just going to assume that relates to all of us. And 99% of the time, it doesn't. So if we're going to fight amongst ourselves, we're going to post stupid stuff online, we're going to be horrible human beings. Joe Blow up the street can post whatever he wants, but if it starts to affect me because everybody believes that I'm the exact same as him, I'm going to have a serious problem with that.
Well, absolutely, because yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, my bad.
Train of thought. I don't know. Go ahead.
I'm trying to share the video.
Go.
Well,
I can't multitask.
With things that portray us too is the general public. They see one thing that's portrayed on the media, and that's what they believe everybody is. Because everybody that usually does really well, cares about the animal, is sick and tired of all the bullshit and the stuff that other people do to each other in the hobby. So
how often is the media posting about the good stuff that happens, though?
Never. It's
they only have the bad to base their opinion off of.
Yep, in the mainstream news.
Yeah,
you hear of conservation efforts and stuff from zoos and stuff. That's a lot different than us just keeping animals at home or in some commercial settings.
But I mean, even when we're out promoting our expos and having the expos, I mean, there's a very common sentiment that, oh, it's just a bunch of backyard breeders getting together trying to flog their stuff. It's lacking positivity. We're lacking that education aspect to it. It's we're there to sell our wares, but
every year, I come and I take pictures of everybody's tables, and I post them on my public Facebook, and I have all my hippie liberal friends, and I say hippie liberal because they are literally liberals and literal hippies, and they're all condemning me for being a fucking horrible person because we're shoving all these animals in tiny containers and blah blah blah, and it's I can tell you're really uneducated.
Yeah.
Well,
and there's no way you're going to listen to me either, because these people are so set in their ways and they're convinced that we're abusing animals, that they're not even willing to learn about the actual practices that we go through to keep those animals safe, secured, happy, and content at those expos. People spend thousands of dollars on fucking heating cabinets. And that's not something that the media is going to see or really care about at all.
No. Usually when some sort of media does come through, they don't go in depth in things. They usually just take a quick view, and they already have their narrative or their agenda for that, depending on who's coming through.
Well, they already have the story about how we're like abusing animals written.
Yeah.
Or reptiles don't belong in people's houses, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's very closely it's very similar to the gun debate in Canada right now. Same narrative. They already have their story, their mind's made up. Now they just have to find the evidence to support it, right? And is there anything positively being, you know, portrayed in the media? No, you always hear about when something bad happens.
Yeah, exactly. Like a local family saves dog from bear by shooting it. Like, I don't know, that doesn't seem like a newsworthy story. Like,
and you see all these stories of people rescuing dogs from bad situations. You don't see that in the media for people rescuing reptiles from bad situations. No. And that happens a lot, unfortunately. That's something that we can't control. We can try to educate people as much as we want, but what those people do with that information is out of our control. So they might listen to us at first, but how they take that information and implement it into their care and their own practices is going to be different.
Yeah, but you guys are also talking about people outside of our community. And I mean, like, the reason that Kiana brought this up yesterday with me was because of a ball python being dumped in a park in Vancouver and somebody commenting it was bad breeders. And I said, no, it's bad owners, because at the end of the day, even if it was a breeder that dumped it, it has nothing to do with them being a breeder, because breeders are still owners. At the end of the day, it was a bad owner.
Absolutely.
Nothing to do with being a breeder. But what happened after I said, no, it was a bad owner, is Kiana and Brandon have seen it. I've got pages and pages of some person berating me about being the devil because I am a horrible human being, because breeders are to blame for everything that goes wrong. And I told them, you know, maybe you should educate yourself. Maybe education is really important. You should know who you're talking about. Because,
Absolutely.
You know, I don't bother explaining to the guy, hey, I'm on the board of directors for the nonprofit. And by the way, I actually run the island side of the rescue. And I've taken in more than 24 animals in the last 3 months that people were getting ready to dump. But he thinks he's better than me, and he does so much more for the hobby because he drove for 6 hours to pay huge money for a boa. I'm not getting into a dick measuring contest with people, but the guy's attacking me as if I'm the one that dumped this snake. But the money that I put out of pocket, I couldn't breed enough for the next 10 years to recover what I've spent out of pocket.
No, especially not rehabbing rescues.
No.
Yeah, and rescues usually come in pretty rough. So.
Well, and 9 times out of 10, they
stuff.
Immediate vet care.
Yeah, I've seen really horrible stuff. And I have no need to post it. I don't want to post, you know, what would be the point of me posting up an animal that's sick and starved and dying? Because, you know what, I post that online and it's back to how we represent ourselves. I post that online and somebody sees it and automatically that's how everybody takes care of their animals. It doesn't matter what narrative I give it, that, you know, this animal came in sick and I'm trying to fix it up. The fact that it's posted online and it's sick or dying or died, that automatically relates to all of us. Like, these are stories that they don't need to be in the public eye.
Yeah.
And I really don't give a shit if anybody knows I do it. But the fact that someone that is supposedly very passionate about this hobby and very involved in the community would actually berate someone who doesn't even know. Like, that's the community destroying itself from within. And that's far more damaging than anything the government can do to us.
Well, like, there's only one way this hobby is going to go somewhere positive, and that's everyone getting on the same page. But, like, there's a lot of people that are just keen to, like, self-destruct it, or just don't care what image they portray to the public.
From a breeder standpoint, I've always been an animal lover first. I only became a breeder a few years ago, and it was after many years of us talking about it and taking all the considerations, and like really weighing it out. But like, I don't know. I always believed in being very transparent, that there was always two sides to everything. I always liked to talk about the good stuff and the bad stuff, because especially as a breeder, you do deal with loss of animals. You do deal with certain things. Obviously, animals can get sick and it happens. But what do you do with that, right? And I never thought enough people were talking about that. But then when I started sharing the good, the bad, and the not so great stuff, I started to see that people weren't focusing so much on the happy parts, but they were like, wow, this person, they killed one of their animals. It's a terrible breeder. Like, their animals are dying. And I'm like, no, like that's totally not how it works. But, I totally did. And I had to step back and be like, okay, you know what? Like, I can't be posting this anymore because people just take it and run. Like, wow.
Well, and like you try to be honest with the world and like give them everything at face value with it. Just be like, I'm being open and honest and I'm not hiding anything, right? And then people are just like that don't understand how these animals behave, period, or what kind of conditions they need to live in, or you don't want to know what the most natural part of breeding is? Not everything is meant to live.
100%.
Not all babies are strong enough. Period.
No.
That's not necessarily a breeder being a bad breeder. You know what? Some children die in childbirth. It happens. It happens with all species across the board. Period.
Well, that's just it. Like, if you look at something like a reticulated python, which obviously we can't keep in BC and Alberta, but you go over to where they're native, like, they're laying 40, 50, 60, 70 eggs. They're not laying that because they have 60 babies that survive. They have a high mortality rate. A lot don't hatch. And even once they hatch, a lot of them become food for something bigger before they're able to mature. The amount of animals that actually grow to adulthood, I bet you it's probably 5%. Like, it's such a low number that actually survive that long. It's the circle of life. Like, everything feeds something.
Yeah.
We got a couple comments here we'll go through real quick. John says, how do you know that Reptiles is happy or comfortable?
And that got posted when we were talking about at the Expos. So I think he means it pertaining to the deli cups.
Yeah.
Happy's tough because reptilian brain is not mammalian brain. The fact is that science has shown, until they prove otherwise, the reptilian brain does not process complex emotions. They don't love, they don't hate. They're not generally happy. So happy is kind of it's anthropomorphism. That's putting human emotions on something that doesn't have it. They can be well taken care of. They can be content. They can feel secure, but happy, they're not going to feel happy.
Yeah. They're going to process a different line of emotions.
Yeah. I like the term content because when the snake feels safe, that it's not going to get killed by a predator and all that kind of stuff, and it's going to feel a lot more content in its environment.
Content
or tolerant. Like, they're tolerant of us. They don't necessarily like us, like Orion, or he doesn't really love me, but he's tolerant of me.
Otherwise he'd be losing his mind.
His temperatures are good. His humidity's great. He's fed. He's watered. He's used to being handled, but he's tolerant of me. He could turn around and bite me in the face at any moment, and it would not be his fault whatsoever.
Well, they're not domesticated animals.
No.
They're not capable of that, I don't think.
We've kept dogs for 10,000 years to get them where they are?
If not longer.
We've been keeping reptiles for like less than 100.
Yeah.
As a hobby.
John said a lot of snakes are kept in small Rubbermaid containers. Do we know if they're comfortable housed like that? It depends on the species, and it depends on how that person implements their care.
Yeah.
Because anybody could use a small aquarium, a small other type of glass enclosure, or a small tub. or even PVC. So it's all about how you house the animals and how you interpret that information for the care of these animals.
Are your size requirements being met? Do you have proper heating? Is your humidity correct? Does it have consistent food and it's able to digest properly?
Do you have a good temp?
Have ample space.
Yeah, because you need space to have a temp gradient, because in the wild, the animal could be basking out in the sun where it's 90 degrees, but 5 feet over, it's going to be 30 degrees less because it's on the ground out of the sun.
I like to judge an animal's well-being and like whether they're content or whatnot based on their behavior. So I recently have been doing a lot of stuff with my king snakes, moving them to different size bins with different substrates, different dryness levels, and I've noticed drastic behavior changes with them. They do better in bigger tubs with more things to climb over and hide in, and they're a lot less bitey or jumpy and nervous. Versus in the smaller containers where they're a little bit drier, maybe paper towel as a substrate. It's interesting. So, I mean, like for me, I do the same thing with my ball pythons. Yes, I might keep them in racks, but some of them don't do well being housed like the rest of them in racks. They need hides or they need, an extra this or something. And it's all on an individual basis. Species and even animals within that species. Each animal has their own needs and requirements.
Well, and like with racks, you can still do bioactive and naturalistic inside a rack.
100%.
You can do it in a bin.
I've been trying.
Plastic and melamine or PVC in a rack is a far better insulator than a tank any day of the week.
Yep.
So if you're not in a temperature-controlled room, a rack is going to be a more stable environment than anything glass. There is no comparison.
It's
so
easier
as long as you build it.
Yep.
Yeah.
John mentioned, how many of those of the people that you end up selling breeding themselves, do you ever worry that the market may be flooded?
I don't breed common animals.
In some species, yes, it can happen. We can't spay and neuter these animals like dogs and cats. There's some procedures that vets do. It's really expensive, but that's in order to better the life of the animal.
Life-saving.
Yeah, because it's egg-bound, so they need to remove its reproductive tract and stuff like that.
Or it had a prolapse hemipene, and it won't go back in, or like it dried out. They have to surgically remove it. Like sterilizing these animals is always not the purpose of the procedure. It's an after effect of a life-saving procedure for something else.
Yeah, it's nothing like dogs and cats where we're worried about overpopulation or somebody doesn't want to breed them. Because if you don't want to breed your snakes, don't house them together. Or if you don't want to breed your lizards, don't house them together. But and then
even at that, like, yes, the market gets oversaturated sometimes, but what ends up happening, and the people that are in it for a quick buck, that threw their snakes together to make money this year,
they fade out within 2 years.
They don't sell. They fire sale everything and they get out. And I bet you in the last year, I've watched, I don't know, half dozen people that were breeding last year and then, this is garbage. And they just sold everything and vanished.
Yeah, absolutely. You see it all the time. Everyone's the next big breeder.
Yeah,
and then they're gone in 6 months.
I always said, if you're in it for the money, you're not going to be in it for long.
No.
Because there's really, it's not about the money, at least with me. It's about the animals. It's a passion.
Yeah.
And that separates the good breeders from the bad breeders. And in any case, whether it's vehicles, animal breeding, or whatever it is, you're always going to have the bad examples. John says, I'm asking specifically regarding to housing during the expo where they spend hours in a small container and in some cases being handled numerous cases. Could that not lead to excessive stress? How do you maintain that in the animal's case?
Oh, can I take this one?
Yes.
I want to take this one. Okay. So here's the problem. I threw up a video a while back. And
tell everyone what you do with Expos.
Me?
Yeah, just so everyone knows where like your expertise is coming from with this.
I do educational displays at Expos. I usually bring I bring boas, I bring carpet pythons. I mean, I've got buds, rats. I think I got about 20 species. So I usually have a pretty good mix of stuff I can bring, and I usually talk people out of buying carpet pythons and really big snakes because they buy them and they're the size of a pencil. Sight, they get sold because I didn't expect it to get this big. So I've talked a lot of people out of buying stuff. The problem with the concept that, the animals are stressed out at expos comes down to the buyer 100%. And the reason is because I guarantee that every single breeder would love to walk into an expo and set up a giant display with realistic enclosures and show off how they actually take care of their animals. But in order to do that, a breeder would have to spend 10 times as much money in order to display at that show, because now they need a complete second set of enclosures on top of the extra table room they need, which means the venue needs to go up in size exponentially. So the venue is going to cost more for whoever's putting it on, generally a nonprofit. The table price is going to go up. You're going to have to buy more tables, which means your $30 ball python or your $50 normal boa is now going to be $500 in order for a breeder to get even remotely close to what it costs to breed these animals.
Yeah.
We have to, the expos have to be a middle ground where, yes, it is stressful for the animals, but this is the only logical way to bridge the gap between what we want and what we have in order to use.
Well, and it's a huge educational opportunity for the public. Like, the Calgary Reptile Expo had close to 5,000 people last year. I'm sorry, the Alberta, there aren't 5,000, reptile breeders, in Alberta. I'm sorry. That was the public coming and learning and getting educated. And they weren't all reptile people. How many of those people don't even know that this community exists, that came to the expo to learn, maybe get their first pet, talk to a really knowledgeable breeder and get firsthand information. How do I take care of this? What do I need? Oh, that vendor right there sells all the enclosures, the heat you'll need, your thermostat, everything you'll need to take care of it. You can buy at a reptile expo and have these people that know the real facts give you the right product and not some regurgitated bullshit care sheet from Petcetera.
That's been around for the last 20 years because they just care about the sale. They don't care about the animals in these big box pet stores.
Yeah.
My favorite is the kids at the expos. The kids that come and they want to see the snakes or the lizards and they want to touch them, but their parents are hesitant. And then they say, well, okay, as long as you're sure. And then, just seeing the kids' faces and their minds just wow, I love it. That is my favorite part as a breeder at the expos, is educating people, getting them to even come remotely close to an animal that they were afraid of because they didn't know about it. And then once they see that animal and that it's not going to hurt them, they're like, wow.
Last year at WCRE, my 8-year-old got to hold a tortoise. And the look on her face is just pure enjoyment. And then she was given hand sanitizer and everything right after. Really awesome handling procedures were made to happen. And then later on, we got an opportunity to get a picture with Littlefoot the American alligator. I'm sorry. Do you know how cool that is to an 8-year-old kid? Because to a 28-year-old kid, that was fucking badass.
Our 4 and 6-year-old girls were over the moon with that too.
That was such an amazing experience. And for our generation, we all grew up watching Steve Irwin, the Crocodile Hunter.
Yes.
That is that man connected with all of us in a really, really special way. And hell yeah, in Steve Irwin, I trust. That man is I idolized him from the very second I ever saw him, and all he ever did was help. And now I watch this show with his kids, and I fucking cry all the time because I'm a big sappy crybaby. But we all got inspired by one man.
Absolutely.
And that's how the rest of this hobby needs to be.
John posted a good question. Would you as a breeder be willing to let people tour your facility to help end the misunderstanding that people have about breeders? That is a big deal because a lot of people have let people come into their facilities. People have stolen stuff. People from other collections who don't take care of their animals.
People have been murdered.
Yes.
Yeah.
People actually have been murdered.
For their collections.
And biosecurity, that's a big one.
100%.
Because you
a
don't
lot
know.
of poultry farmers won't let you onto their facilities because of biosecurity.
Yep,
it's a huge risk to your animals. It's the same reason you don't take your ball python draped around your neck to the pet store.
Which many people still do,
but those
but
people
it's not worth the security, the safety and health of my animal. It's not.
The people who are doing that are the people who don't understand biosecurity, or
they're the boop noodlers.
Yes, they don't understand.
Don't be a boop noodler.
Because I don't know if you have mites. Viruses in snakes and lizards are becoming more pronounced. Nidovirus. It's actually changed to serpentovirus. Yeah, it's. I was listening to a podcast about a virologist talking about it. They renamed it, but that's a whole nother episode.
COVID, same.
There's a lot to it because these viruses are in these animals. Something does trigger it. It's not necessarily bad keeping practices. Some of these diseases and viruses
can lay dormant for like months, like
they have
year.
Asymptomatic symptoms, and they don't show anything. So it could lay dormant in one animal and then pop up in another animal. And some of these viruses and stuff come up and they will wipe out one species, but won't affect the other. So there's just a lot to it and to take into account, and your cleaning procedures and everything else. So that's why a lot of breeders don't have people come to their house.
So in my case, if I was breeding in a facility that was not my home, I would probably have a procedure where I could let people in if it was prearranged.
Yeah, I would be much more willing in that
sanctuary. I am on 10 acres in the woods. You do not get past the end of my driveway.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is a lot of people do it in their home, so they don't want a bunch of random strangers who are going to case out their house for a couple $1,000s in snakes.
I get stressed out when there's a vehicle parked outside of my house that isn't someone I know, and they're like lost figuring out Google Maps, and like I'm stressed out.
Yeah.
The other thing too is like I'm a licensed home-based business. We have children, so I do have the public come to my house sometimes, and it's like, please don't judge me. Like, this is my dining room. So when you come to buy a steak from me, it's going to be up here. I'm most likely going to meet you at my front door or at another undisclosed location that we agree upon. But I'm not going to take you down to my snake room. And that's so many people ask me. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I don't know you. I don't know where you've been. And also, I've had people that have visited my house and seen how I do things, because again, I like to be very transparent. I will not lie to you. You're more than welcome to show up here tomorrow and come check out my stuff. But I've had people come here and then they leave and start seeing stuff online and being like, oh, well, she had this here and that there and that wasn't like that in that picture. And I'm like, what's it to you? Like, we live here. I'm sorry, but like things change, right? Like, I have a quarantine / where I sell things, and then I have my actual breeding stuff downstairs. And I have things separated. I have cleaning protocols. And if you want me to explain it, sure, but no, I'm not just going to let everybody waltz through my house and check out my stuff.
Yeah.
No, I do a video on my place if people really wanted to know. Like, I could show people, but it's not about hiding things.
Yeah.
No.
John mentioned when you mentioned biosecurity at your breeding facility, doesn't having reptiles in an expo place them at the same risk as people handling numerous animals and not disinfecting between each booth? Absolutely, it does. And that's why
gallons of hand sanitizer. We're very specific about things handled. And when you talk about biosecurity, I mean, I go through this quite a bit because I do bring animals to handle, and
animals are generally vet checked upon arrival.
Yes. So that's
all of my handled stuff goes straight back into quarantine when it goes home.
Yeah,
I have to go through the process all over again. They all get pulled away from everything else.
So just like it's a brand new animal.
Yeah, I mean, the animals that I take to shows and get handled, they're basically in perpetual quarantine. I mean, once they go in, they're in quarantine for 2 months and they're back at another show. Well, not this year, but you know, they're in quarantine for 2 months, they're back at another show, and then they're back in quarantine for another 2 months. Like, that's what it takes for me to be able to do it. But in my case, the educational side of things is pretty damn important, and I'm willing to do that. But
well, and then you're also taking the proper procedures in order to, one, not risk your collection that you do sell to the public. Your educational animals are separate.
I do know some breeders that I respect quite a bit that will not let people handle their animals for sale even until the purchase. Like, you don't need to handle that snake. You're buying it based on my word and my reputation and how it looks. And like, look, yes, biosecurity is important. You want to handle it once you've purchased it and you're taking it home. That's just fine.
It's yours after you purchase
it. Yeah. And there's some people I highly respect that's their process, and that probably keeps them safer.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a person who helps run the Calgary Expo, we have lots of public complaints that there's not enough, vendors aren't letting us touch the animals. Yeah. That's up to the vendor because they don't want to stress the animals more than they already are. So the point of an expo isn't show and tell.
No.
If you want to go show and tell, hire somebody that does that kind of stuff for a living, that does the educational side and lets you touch the animals. At our expo, we have Kids Corner. There are some animals there that you can touch or look at, depending on what it is. So there are opportunities to look at animals, and just because it's at somebody's table doesn't necessarily mean you need to touch it.
I've had a lot of feedback as a vendor, as a breeder as well at the expos. Similar people, their kids want to touch an animal, and I politely decline, and I explain why. And I've been snubbed before, and it's not that I'm doing it to be rude or because I don't trust you. I'm doing it to keep you and my animals safe.
Yeah.
Like, I took my Argentines to the last show. To get people talking about them because they're not very common. You don't see them around a lot. I love them. Orion is such a good boy. He's very well behaved, and people loved them, but everyone wanted to touch them, and I just know I wasn't comfortable. And if for whatever reason he became uncomfortable, that's my animal. If you drop him or, if he lashes out at somebody, I mean, that's my responsibility. So no, I'm sorry. I've also had people drop snakes on the table and almost hit the floor.
I've had some animals in Kids Corner, and we do let some of the public handle the animals under supervision of either me, some of the volunteers that are trained to look for signs of stress in the animals. And the public sometimes has mishandle the animal, they accidentally do get dropped or other stuff like that, which is very unfortunate, but you got to watch out for those things and be on the ball, especially for a person who's not necessarily experienced in handling some of these animals that we have at these expos.
Yeah.
Well, me personally, I don't sell at expos. I would like to, eventually in a couple years when I build up enough of a breeding stock of what I'm breeding. But as it stands, I'm just a little hobbyist trying to get a not so common species a little easier to fucking find in Canada for one.
Message me later.
Do you like geckos?
Do I like geckos?
Yeah.
I have a wall of them.
Well, it's nothing like any of them, I bet.
No? Oh, okay. You'll have to share later.
Yeah. I've been trying to get some cool stuff from Europe, so.
John brought up another question. Is there any certification required to become a reptile educator, or most hobbyists just want to share their passion?
No, and there needs to be.
Yes, there does. 100%.
Absolutely. But
because it's completely unregulated.
The only place that has
reptiles, anything reptile education is non-regulated, and I can tell you for a fact that it goes beyond just hobbyists trying to educate people, because I've actually done a class at the college for vet tech students or vet assistant students.
I've done that too.
The people teaching the class said there was absolutely zero curriculum for reptiles, and whatever the students were going to learn, they were going to learn in the one day with the animals that I brought, and that was it.
Yeah,
that's not enough.
That's
No,
sad.
not at all.
at the Olds College too, and they're like, yeah, we have a week on exotic animals, and that covers birds through reptiles to rodents. So they're like, it's great that we get to learn about these animals, and you guys have experience because you've taken your animals to the vets, so you guys have a good idea of common ailments and stuff like that that we're normally going to see. And they also get to see some of the animals that might come in, so it gives them a little bit of hands-on experience.
Yeah, so like, you know, there's definitely members of the community that are trying to go at this with a more professional attitude, and, you know, going to colleges and giving demonstrations to those, you know, vet tech students and stuff like that. That's invaluable information that they're not getting without us.
Yeah.
Period.
And my vet told me that I probably know more about my snakes than he does. He knows enough, and he has people to reach out to. But I mean, in the area where I live, vets will not take a snake over 6 feet, which eliminates a quarter of my collection.
Yeah.
He makes an exception because I'm willing to go in and help and handle. But it came down to the fact, you know, I went in for a problem, and he said, "You've already done everything I would have suggested. I need to make a phone call."
Yeah.
So they need more.
Yeah, Cody McMillan said vets should have specialties like doctors. I have a couple vets around my area. We're lucky we have some reptile vets, exotic vets. And at the one office, they have a reptile vet, a small mammal vet, and a bird vet. So,
but they're not allowed to use the word specialist until they get board certified as a specialist.
So there's a board specifically for exotics, and you have to spend tons of money to get on. You have to have lots of documentation, lots of paperwork and essays.
Yeah, you have to write papers on it and stuff like that.
And they have to approve it, and then it's a really long process. It can take years. So there's not on it.
If you want to learn more about that, tune into our episode with Dr. Kelsey Chapman, which you can find on YouTube and Podbean and everywhere else you find our episodes.
So it's really hard to get into, and when she was telling us at some point that when she started her vet career, it was, we're learning about dogs, cats, horses, pigs, stuff that is on a farm. And then there's this small opportunity to either go to exotics and take that, or you continue with small meat and potatoes kind of thing.
Or you go to cats and dogs.
Yeah, and that's where all the money is. So some people love the reptiles and exotics, so they go that route. So it's just what they choose to do. And now that reptiles and more exotic animals are becoming more common pets, it's a lot easier for people to take these courses, become vets in that field. So there's more specialties. It's just having enough vets to meet the demand and where they are.
Well, a girl that I went to high school with, super sweet, timid girl, loved, like, you know, everything soft and fluffy and lovable, right? So, like, she's all about kitties and puppies, you know, that kind of girl. So, she's gone to school to become, I think, a vet tech, and she works with Dr. Chapman at Calgary Avian and Exotics. And because of her, she's taken a huge interest into reptiles, and she's asking me about stuff, and it's like, yes, the cute puppy dog lover now wants to learn about reptiles. And it's just like, it feels good when someone that you would like least expect it from gets really interested in it, because reptiles are fucking badass. Like, there's no other way to put it. They're badass, and there's so many of them.
So I'm really lucky that I found a vet up here in Edmonton. Well, she's in St. Albert. She really likes reptiles. But I took our dog to a vet for an emergency that was close to home here in Edmonton. And I asked him, I always ask him, like, would you see reptiles? Like, if I brought in a 6-foot snake with, you know, whatever, let's say a respiratory infection or something, would you be comfortable? And he said that they're actually not allowed to see reptiles in Alberta unless they do so regularly, because so many vets, people were taking their reptiles to the vets and being like, please just do anything fix it, something bad would happen, or they didn't get the outcome they were hoping for, and then they blamed the vet. So now that pool of vets that will see reptiles is even smaller.
Yeah. And the thing too is vets that aren't trained in exotics, they want to help the animals. Yeah. They just aren't knowledgeable enough. So
they're qualified.
Yeah, and a lot of the things is there's so many species of reptiles and other exotic animals. There's 3,000 species of snakes, how many thousands species of lizards. So they're not going to know everything. So a lot of these things too, especially with exotics now, is it's kind of trial and error for certain things, because one medication might work for one species, but it's not going to work for the other because of different genetic makeup and how these animals take these medications, because their digestive tracts and everything else and how they metabolize all these medications is going to affect them differently.
Well, and the science isn't there, plain and simple. Like, there's not enough research. There aren't enough studies being done with reptiles. I think it's most likely a funding thing and a money thing. Not enough people. There's not enough of a demand to know more about reptiles. And
also with a lot of these research, it takes years. So because they're taking small samples. I was listening to a recent podcast where they're looking into different different behaviors in captive settings on different things. I read a recent article from a zoo where they took 5 hognoses, set them up on just regular newspaper and a hide, and then they set them up in more naturalistic and seen the behavior changes. But that took 6 years because it was 3 years for each study, so they had enough data to back up what they were trying to find.
And like these studies can't just happen overnight.
Yeah, you can't get the answer overnight. It takes years, sometimes a decade, to get these answers, because they want unbiased opinions backed by science.
Yeah.
Not by your feelings.
Or breeders even. Like, a lot of us are capable of partaking in this stuff, but we have no scientific backgrounds. A lot of us have high school education, and, like, nobody really cares that we're experimenting with that kind of stuff, right? But I don't know.
It's a very slippery slope to find that happy medium of the people who are in the hobby and the people who just view from the outside.
Well, and the thing is like, how long have each of us been in the hobby? And then how long were we reptile keepers before we even found this community? And then once we found the community, that's when we actually started to learn anything. I've kept reptiles since I was like, I've had exotics since I was like 4 years old. Like, literally my entire life. And we knew nothing about proper keeping practices at all until all of a sudden the wonderful world of like fauna classifieds and like Facebook groups, when you could get on there and find the online community and other people talking about this stuff and making the changes and sharing their knowledge. So what people forget is the reptile keeping community is a billion years behind, the dogs and cats, because we haven't had them domesticated for 10,000 years. Yeah. We have to catch up. I'm sorry. You have to give us time to get there. Like that, like we're trying. And then there's keepers like all of us here in this chat that are actively trying to improve the hobby, improve keeping practices, and always move this forward so we can catch up with everybody else.
John mentioned, for the sake of argument, should those reptiles where limited scientific knowledge is available not be sold in the pet trade until research is being completed by those with a research background? That could take 100 years.
That's an interesting concept. And I mean, your dog in your profile picture is probably some kind of mutt. So since he's a crossbreed of 7 different breeds of dogs, perhaps he shouldn't have been sold into the pet trade until we figured out how those different breeds intermingled in a mutt. Correct. The logic there is not sound, because the fact is that nobody wants to put the money in. Nobody in that position wants to put the money into the research, and the hobbyists bring massive amounts of information.
We're putting the money into the research. We're doing the research.
Because a lot of these species, they were never bred in captivity till somebody imported them and figured out how they breed and figured out what they needed. That wasn't government agencies doing it. It was hobbyists. And it's just like everything else. The passion is what fuels it. And we do it out of our own pockets. And yes, sometimes there's a hard learning curve, but how it has to be found out somewhere. And beyond that, you're saying keep them out of the pet trade. The fact is that the hobbyists actually help with conservation, because by figuring out what these species need to survive, we can actually figure out how to breed them in captivity and return them to the wild if it comes to that. For species that are going extinct, there's cases all over the world where it's hobby breeders that are helping repopulate entire populations of species.
How many times are people returning like sea turtle eggs that they've found in decimated nests, taken into captivity, hatched out, and released to the wild when those animals had no chance? And it was just someone like me, someone like you, or someone like you guys.
Also, with
we know how to do it.
The amount of deforestation, because we are creating our own habitats for us and not the animals. If we don't propagate a lot of these harder to keep species into the hobby, these animals are going to go extinct. They're not going to be around. We're not going to see them at all.
And that's just it. Like on a shelf 4 feet from me, right over here, I have a Poecilotheria metallica, which is a tarantula. And everybody's seen one that's ever seen a tarantula. They're beautiful. They're blue and black and white and yellow. They are phenomenal. It's one of my favorite tarantulas. Now, what people don't realize is that in the wild, they live in about 2 square miles of rainforest. That's it. That's all. The rest of their natural habitat has been clear cut. It's gone. 2 square miles, which means there's probably maybe a couple hundred of these things in the wild. In the pet trade, however, there are millions of them.
Yeah.
The only reason these animals exist is because of the pet trade.
Yeah.
So back to the initial question, though, of whether or not a not commonly kept species in captivity should be sold in the pet trade. I've seen people like Ashley Dezan before, when they're looking to import something, say, look, this is for experienced keepers only, will not go to just anyone. And personally, me, I'm actually about to receive an animal that isn't very commonly captive bred from somebody, and I've been doing research, and honestly, it's hard to find. But
all I can find is taxonomist reports. So all my information is based off of scientists studying them in the field. No captive information. Yeah. What better is there for me to base my information off of other than the scientists out in the field? Please tell me. I would love to know.
So like you say, okay, this animal is from Madagascar. Well, what is the climate like in Madagascar? What are the temps like in the nighttime in this region? What are the humidity levels like at this time of year? Also, reach out, find somebody else, perhaps the person you're getting them from, and say, hey, look, what have you found works for them? Yep. Right? I mean, information might be hard to find. It doesn't mean to say the species can't do well in captivity. You just need to make sure that species is going to capable hands.
And that person understands how to do the how to educate themselves. Like, I have a species from Madagascar, and Brandon has multiple species from Madagascar, right?
The spicy.
Now, despite the fact that they're from the same chunk of island, my animals come from a totally different altitude than his. I don't keep my Dumerose boa the way he keeps his hog noses. It doesn't make sense, does it? Just because they're from the same place doesn't mean they get the same care requirements.
It wouldn't matter if they were living. It wouldn't matter if they were covering the exact same area. The care requirements aren't the same. A common BCI boa shares a footprint of land with a Brazilian rainbow boa.
And they're totally different animals.
You can take care of the BRB like you do a BCI. Yep. They have been found 10 feet apart in the wild, but you cannot keep them the same in captivity.
When I was talking to Dr. Mark Schurz, he mentioned that there's some species of snakes that share very similar DNA in the wild to Madagascar hognoses, and they live in trees. compared to being terrestrial where they live on the ground.
That was like Dave Kaufman's episode about the reticulated python. They actually live in trees up to a certain stage in their life, which everyone I've ever seen lives in a rack. So that was mind-blowing.
Like juvenile male ball pythons are more commonly found in low-hanging branches and like shrub brushes and hunting birds. The birds are more commonly found in the stomach of young male ball pythons because they're hunting from low-laying branches.
That's a fun fact right there. I'm gonna have to look into that.
And how many keepers are looking that up?
I was actually just talking to Brandon today about how I'm really disappointed at the lack of information about ball pythons in the wild.
Yeah, for sure. And me and Brandon never really wanted to touch on ball pythons because
everybody else
don't really like ball pythons.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, they just don't interest us. It's nothing against the animal itself. It's just it doesn't get it going for us. But there's a lot of information out there that needs to be out there about ball pythons. So we've kind of started
about all species, and that kind of relates to John's question here. The physiology of dog's cat breed is very similar, and we're still learning. Can we all agree that there are considerably more reptile species with unique needs and physiology? These questions are what people not in the trade ask and are after all this the purpose of the podcast, correct? Yes. So
absolutely.
Absolutely. You are podcast is to share information and nothing else.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is that he's not wrong. He's not wrong at all. Yes, reptiles have much more special needs. But the problem is we go back to we are held to a higher standard. Those of us that want to put the time into educational stuff, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard and the rest of the community to a higher standard than a dog and cat that's probably bred in a puppy mill.
Well, please tell me how an uneducated keeper is going to go get a Strofer's Tanacotta, or how is the uneducated keeper just going to go pick up Leoheteron madagascarensis? Please tell me. They're not.
I have a few species that most people would kill for. I've got a few species here that not many people do. But the thing is it's he's talking about how there's special needs and they're this and that, but we go back to the same thing where cats and dogs are cute and fluffy and everybody loves them and their standards are lower, but at the same time, the general public wants to put tax dollars, they want to put government money, university money into researching cute, fluffy animals. They do not want to fund the research required. So if it's not the hobbyists that are putting in the footwork and spending their money and putting in their time, this research will never happen for a lot of species.
Have cats and dogs ever contributed to cancer research or medications made from stuff secreted by them? I'm legitimately curious because I know that there's definitely been lots of medications that have been made from reptiles.
Yeah,
And I'm not talking Chinese medicine.
No, they use a lot of different proteins and different chemicals that are in venoms to make different medications.
And lots of cancer research.
Yeah, Komodo dragon venom has been used to help aid in cancers, dementia. Beaded lizard venom is used also to help treat dementia, I think. They're looking into certain things because there's different protein compounds in all of these venoms that they can use to make medications to better people's lives. And it's not
an animal I want to make sure isn't going to go extinct.
That's not even my concern. I mean, this is my personal choice. This is what I keep, and this is where I want to spend my time. And I don't care if I got to spend 18 hours a day for the rest of my life to figure out what I need to figure out to keep them. That's exactly what I'm going to do.
Yeah,
I mean, whether or not the culture around us is accepting, I don't really care. But this is what I'm going to do.
Dustin Noble raises a good question. Shall I ask the question about thoughts on hybrids? A lot of people are doing ball python, blood python hybrids. Just curious on everyone's thoughts. Generally, on my thoughts,
if you are educated and doing it ethically, I have nothing what am I supposed to pick you apart for? Especially if they have natural habitat crossover and like hybridization naturally happens. I'm not going to say a damn thing to you. I'm really not. There's lots of animals that do naturally hybridize. Now, if you're not educated enough to do it ethically and responsibly, then go fuck yourself.
Yeah, I think my only concerns with it would be there's a lot of species that people hybridize that personally I don't think they should, like an Angolian ball. You know what? There's not many Angolians in captivity, and I know that because I have a couple, but I couldn't picture myself breeding it back to a ball python because of the limited availability of them and like how many there actually are.
And why would you take all the crappy things out of a ball python and put it into an Angolan, which is like a better,
which is a super cool animal.
Well,
but my argument
about the Occidentalis as well.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of boas are technically hybrids, aren't they?
Well, I'll take it a step farther because boas most people breed BCIs, and I mean, not very often that people breed a BCC or a BC to a BI. But if we want to talk about Morelia, anything carpet pythons are mutts. I mean, you cannot have a pure jungle jag because a jaguar is a coastal morph. Therefore, if it's got jag in it, it's part coastal. No matter how you cut it, it can't be pure. Almost every carpet python on the market is a hybrid. Almost every one. Unless you have documentation proving when it came out of Australia, pre-ban, going back that far, I can pretty much guarantee it is not pure.
Yeah.
And
that happens with a lot of species too, especially from Australia, because there's no imports of new blood. So everybody's kind of working with what they
mainly
got.
Australian species.
Yeah,
it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, in regards to the blood python, ball python thing, it is something that I have noticed gaining popularity. And I mean, I personally am slightly intrigued because I've always been kind of a little bit, Frankenstein's monsterish.
The sciencey kid in me wants to learn.
Yes,
realistically, like I want to learn. I am more than willing to learn about these animals as long as they're being ethically produced.
But like the thing that
that's what I care about.
Other people doing it is you have to expect a lot of loss. Like a hybridization of two different species isn't as simple as putting two different animals together and getting babies. Like there's a lot of stuff that
which is like why it's for super beyond advanced keepers only. Like I would never even dream of it.
And the thing is too with some hybrid species is they're two different animals from two different areas. So how do you combine that care required for one animal that requires higher humidity and other hotter basking spots, and then one that is slightly cooler and requires less humidity? How do you know to take care of that animal properly?
100%. And like Dustin's other comment was about, Chris's argument about the carpets. Like they just get so muddied, and then where does it come from? What bloodlines or what? Where's the documentation? So if I was to produce super balls, a blood python, ball python cross, and I sold it to the next guy as a ball python,
then you're a piece of shit.
Well, I would be a big piece of shit. But I mean, what is the care on that animal? Where did it come from?
Like how do you determine which side they go after with two animals that have such different care requirements? Like wouldn't it because like even with wolf dogs, you don't get, it's not like 50-50. That's not how the genetics work. You get a random percentage in each puppy, right? And hybrid hybrid reptiles are going to be the exact same. They're going to get different percentages of each trait from each parent. So you're going to have to see how each individual animal thrives before you can even sell it. To me, in my opinion, anyway. And that's coming from someone with zero experience with hybrids.
But like genetically too. So you have certain ball python morphs that are prone to certain genetic dysfunctions, we'll say, like wobbles or kinking or whatever. But if you take like the hybrids, as far as I know, people have been trying it for years, but it's still very uncharted territory because a lot of people don't want to talk about it. But nobody really, I don't think, knows the genetic repercussions. So is there something that they're more prone to genetically? Should these hybrids be bred? And if so, it's just, I don't know.
Well, and that goes back to my point before. Who's doing the research besides us?
But that's just it. It's never going to be black and white. Like everybody hears hybrid and they think like berm ball automatically.
Yeah.
Like you could go straight to a corn snake. Like what is it? A creamsicle corn snake is a rat snake hybrid.
Yeah,
Like,
a lot of them are like actual hybrids.
Also,
but
in the wild,
like also a corn snake, like, if whatever morph, the creamsicle or whatever it is, it's like an amelanistic rat snake hybrid that's been bred back to corn so many times that they call it a corn morph, but that's not where it originated.
Yep.
It originated somewhere else.
Even in the wild too, sometimes there's some species that have been documented to hybridize.
Everglades rat snake and the yellow rat snake are so closely, they're so close in a geographic range and so close by, like they're naturally hybridized. Yes.
Moon vipers and rhino vipers naturally hybridize. They're beautiful, aren't they?
But the species
and the hybrids are stunning.
Absolutely.
The species that are doing it though are so close in genetic capability and care because they're in the same environment.
Exactly, the same geographical range.
Yeah.
So that makes a big difference. So and it's I
don't know. I think we're all like okay with hybrids as long as it's being done like properly and like there's certain combinations like boa condas which are known to be fatal and have like a 0% success rate. Why are you gonna try it? If an animal has 100% mortality rate, I really don't think you should keep going. I really don't.
Don't hybridize tarantulas or I'll get stabby. BRB.
Can they hybridize?
I don't know.
Yes, tarantulas can hybridize within certain species, but because of the limited, like it's a big no-no. And
I have one T and I'm scared of him.
There's certain unethical breeders that did it years ago and possibly still do and came up with their own new species of hybrid, and they were very looked down on for it because
it's just like with anything else, like in the dog and cat thing, there's lots of hybrids there. Nobody's batting an eye anymore because pugs have fucking flat faces and health problems out the asshole, but people are still buying them.
And that's people breeding a breed to shit. Have you seen what pugs looked like 100 years ago? Yeah, they were still brachycephalic, but they could at least fucking breathe.
Yep.
That comes down to the snakes too. What genetic repercussions are we gonna have with hybrids?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, maybe that's a good thing that we haven't been trying to domesticate them for 10,000 years. Is we've seen the fuck ups of the dogs and cats that maybe we can, steer clear of some of the shit that's going wrong.
They're not really dogs though, so.
Yeah, they're like rats.
A Chihuahua's not a dog.
I would actually trust a Chihuahua to be a better mouser than a cat.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. That's what they were bred for. They're rat
yeah.
killers.
Any of those little dogs were actually straight up bred to hunt vermin. And Tyler's bitching because I want a small dog after one of the big one goes, and it's like
whatever keeps you sound asleep at night, Justin. All right, Dustin.
Maybe I should
us in the public eye, like really. I think this podcast is hopefully a step in the right direction because it gets more people listening and knowing that there's keepers like us that are always trying to improve and advance.
There will always be the one person to try and do the impossible just for the sake of saying they tried. Yes. And
it's like any community. That's not even just reptiles. That's like literally anything ever in existence.
Yeah.
Period.
Oh, absolutely.
Somebody tells somebody you can't do it, they're going to be like, oh, I'm going to do it out of spite. So.
Yeah.
and some people are just that way. What we can do is educate people to the best that we can. What those people do with that knowledge is up to them. We can't control how people interpret knowledge and what they do with it. So what we can do is give them enough scientific information and studies and stuff like that and experience to provide a background of what we are trying to explain. And some people will absolutely agree with it. They will research it. Or some people will just be like, no, my cousin's aunt, uncle had a snake that laid next to it. Sized her up. And they'll just stick with that story because they believe their aunt's uncle's nephew. So we only can do so much.
I wish I had the schooling to back my opinion. I really wish I did. I would love to go to school and get a big fancy degree in biology and specialize in herpetology. I would love to. I really would. But you know what? I am a 28-year-old mom of 2, and that's not feasible for me because I was young and dumb and fucked up my life when I was really young. So I can't just drop my entire life to go get that education. But you know what? I'm still putting all the work and the time in to get my education, but just in a different way. I'm sorry I'm not getting it from textbooks, but I'm putting in the time and effort to get it in every other way that I can. And that's the only thing that I can do. And I think that's the way that you constantly advance your keeping skills.
Yeah, and there's absolutely different ways to get the education and knowledge and experience. It's not necessarily just going to a university to study herpetology and then discover a new species. Some people discover new species every day. They do the descriptions and then they work on to the next species. So they discovered it and that's the end of it for now until some other scientist comes along and does the research. So sometimes people in the public, like us, keepers, do the research in a captive setting. It might not necessarily be in the wild where some people can watch these animals for weeks on times or months and do the studies, because finding, 10,000 people to study every animal, it's not going to be really realistic because it costs a lot of money to travel everywhere and do all this stuff.
And then you have like I bet you we could easily organize 100 people to go study the rattlesnake dens here in Alberta, but can we do it? No, the government won't allow us to because we don't have someone studying them that's working on writing a paper to come and escort us, basically. But we're here. We want the knowledge. We want to do the work, but we don't have the schooling that allows us to go do these things, you know? So how are we supposed to?
I mean,
we're allowed to do.
That's also not to say, though, that someone should, just go and find an animal out of their league and go, wee, I'm going to figure out how to take care of this thing because I want the experience, too.
No, I've seen rattlesnakes in the wild. I think it's, the prairie rattlesnake that we have here. I've been hiking in the Badlands my entire life with my dad. Rattlesnakes have been a regular encounter for me for my entire life.
I caught snakes when I was there.
I'm not going to try and go hook one. I'm not. I don't have a basic video. The education. I know I see them. I'm not going to go near. I'm going to admire it from afar, try and capture some pictures. I'm not going to try and fuck around with it because I straight up don't have an education. And I want if I'm going to be fucking around with venomous animals, I want that hands-on education from like a professional. Yeah. You know? Like
that's
if I had
mature and intelligent, you know.
Do and get hands-on experience with someone, like I would absolutely take that opportunity in like that professional controlled setting, but like I'm not gonna go. I can easily go out to Drumheller and grab a fucking rattlesnake. I can. I'm not going to because it's not smart. It's not going to benefit me in any way. What am I going to learn from just going and messing around with the snake that I'm not qualified to handle?
Well, if you're like that woman from Florida, you'll learn not to do that again.
She died. She got eaten by a crocodile because she tried to pet a crocodile while she was drunk.
Yep.
And there's always going to be people like that case where people are going to be under the influence of alcohol, do things that aren't ethical and aren't smart to do, like going into waist deep water where there's alligators. It's not a very smart idea. Yeah.
I watch a lot of Naked and Afraid, and I'm like, oh, there's gators in that water. It's like, because I've done the research and I understand like somewhat the behavior-ish, right? But like I don't have any of that hands-on experience. I was like, oh, that's a smart idea. It's like, oh wow, you're like trying to kill a venomous snake the size of a twig with a stick. You're wild as hell. I hope you're really starving for that risk.
Yeah. Caitlin's got a comment. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
and I think that pertains to everything in reptile keeping.
I think that pertains to really everything
in life.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know. I want to see this hobby do good and advance, right? But like, we're held to a standard against people that have been doing this for like so much longer than us.
Don't tell me what to do.
I am. Background. Okay, now you're looking weird.
Sorry, you guys are in my house, and there's like a peanut gallery back there making comments.
Oh, that's okay. I can hear my kids outside the back door.
We locked ours in the basement.
I'm ignoring them. They might be fighting. Hopefully you guys can't hear it.
But yeah, it's just keeping the hobby in the good eye of the public, because there's a lot of animal rights activists who already are in Parliament. They have political power.
Good eye.
They have a lot more money than we do.
Oh, I don't think so.
And they've already
people naturally want to give their votes to someone trying to protect animals. And I get that. But you know what? We're not here trying to hurt animals either. We're literally trying to advance science with them. Like,
and advance our methods of keeping. Like, how can we be doing it better?
Yeah, like we want to do nothing but improve. And like the people that are doing a bad job, we try and educate them.
Yeah. So I've had kind of a moral dilemma with the substrates that I have in my snake room. So I have very poor ventilation in my room. It's very warm. It gets quite humid. So I find, you need this? Okay. So, but I find that when I use the cocoa substrates, I get a lot of mold and I get a lot of like bacteria buildup. My water dishes get really gross. So personally in my room, paper towel is the way to go. I've gotten a lot of flack for that online, but I've tried everything. I've tried Aspen. I've tried newspaper, paper towel. I've tried...
Like, do you want to expose your animals to mold constantly? Or do you want a substrate that works for you in your room, in your house where you are producing your animals?
And I'm not saying that everyone should use paper towel. I'm not saying Brandon couldn't use cocoa in his house. It's not feasible in my house. But are my animals any less off? Are they any worse off because I use paper towel? If anything, it allows me to keep them cleaner and healthier.
So this room up here, it has no ventilation in it. I do have a window in it. I make sure I open it every day so it gets, some air exchange in here. And this is where like all my Australian species are, because it's hot and dry. All my ball pythons are downstairs. And like they're happy in their bins. The humidity and stuff like that's better for them down here. This room is dry as fuck. Put a ball python in here and tell me how it's gonna do. It's gonna shed like shit. It's not gonna eat. Even like I keep them in racks and they eat flawlessly. I literally cannot complain. I'm sorry, it works. It's literally working for them.
And like tanks work too if you set it up properly, but as a computer, a tank are not feasible.
I think it's going to cost way more money to make a glass tank work than buying a fucking rack.
100%.
Yeah, and
Sorry,
glass is a terrible insulator.
I have glass here. I have glass here. They are dry species animals that have lower humidity. That's why they're in these glass tanks in this dry ass room. These are the animals this room works for. You know, my other animals, this room doesn't work for them, and it's gonna cost. Actually, it is gonna cost a lot of money to make this room work for my other animals. So why don't I just keep them where everything is more in their parameters and keep these animals where it's more in their parameters? To me, that makes way more sense than trying to force something into a fish tank downstairs.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's all on about how you implement the care and requirements for that animal. So, and to reiterate again, you can shove a snake or any reptile into a small enclosure. Doesn't mean it's right. You should be doing what's best for the animal, put it in a larger enclosure. Doesn't matter if it's glass, a plastic tub, a PVC enclosure. Anybody can...
grow tent.
Yeah, anybody can not use them in the proper fashion.
But there is more to it than size.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I would rather see a ball python in a small enclosure that maintains humidity, like a rack, even if it was a smaller rack than some people would prefer, than sticking them in a glass tank with a mesh lid in front of your living room window that you leave open.
Not getting their heat even met.
Yeah, the space is only one consideration. I mean, we have space and we have temperature and we have humidity and we have security.
You need to have everything in balance for it to work.
And traffic too, because if some animals are in high traffic areas, they feel stressed because they don't feel secure.
I've had to put some animals downstairs and leave them there because of that, because they don't do well with kids or the dog or whatever. And again, you know, it's not just about the species, it's about the individual animals and what's right for them.
Absolutely.
Caitlin says, what are your opinions on free roam reptiles? It's fucking wrong.
And there is not a single species of reptile that we can let free roam anywhere where we can meet its requirements. You let an iguana roam around the house or a tengu, they still need UVB, they still need heat gradients, they still need humidity. I mean, unless you're going to replace every bulb in your house with a UVB every 6 months and
you mean UVB that they need to be within 12 to 16 inches of for it to be effective? That UVB? So what's the point in changing every light in your house when it's 8 feet at least above all of them? It's not feasible. You can't do it. Period.
And are you going to monitor that animal 24/7 to make sure they don't get themselves into a dangerous situation?
Yeah. See, there's people like Sarah with Winston the Tegu. She renovated an entire bedroom and made it like waterproof and everything. And her Winston the Tegu has an entire bedroom as an enclosure.
And he has an enclosure inside the room.
Oh, like a secondary enclosure?
He has an enclosure in the room, and the room's waterproof, so he has extra space to free roam. So he can move in and out of the enclosure as he pleases.
And I bet you it wasn't cheap to get it set up for him either. And I bet you nobody has a fucking bedroom to dedicate.
He has a castle.
That's why I don't have an iguana, because I cannot dedicate the time, space, and resources that an iguana would need as much as I would love one.
No, we have a Savannah that came in through the rescue. It came to us. It's juvie, and it's in a 4x8x5 in my living room. Because what was the point in putting it in anything smaller when it's going to need that when it's an adult? And like anybody that's ever put a 4x8 enclosure in their living room, it sounds big. It is so much bigger than it sounds.
I have one in my living room too.
2 full couches.
Well, Brandon has seen my my boa enclosure in my bedroom. It's 6 feet long and 4 feet tall, and it is. I hate it. I hate it. Want to know why I hate it? Because it's big and bulky, and it's in my fucking way for my literally daily existence. But you know what? I love the animal that's in it, and she deserves it.
Yep.
fucking sucks, but she deserves it and she needs it.
Yep.
Right? And I'm not going to give my animals some kind of piss poor bullshit for my convenience.
And that's what some people do too, is they believe certain things, and I only can afford this $500 animal, but I only got $50 to properly house it.
So you have $50 for an animal is more so what that means.
I've actually had this dilemma with sales lately. I've had, with no expos, a lot more people have been inquiring. And my first question is always, do you have a proper enclosure setup? I'm not asking if you have a tank or a rack or whatever. Have you done the research? And
do you have an enclosure?
Properly.
Yeah.
Not a fish tank that you got off of the buy and sell and just threw some bark in it. Like, have you put the time into a thermostat and proper gradients and this and that for the animal that you're inquiring about?
I saw a local selling a ball python on sand for $300 lately.
There's a special needs ball python locally for sale for $400 with a deformed jaw from knife rot.
The deformed jaw sounds like it should have been called.
Yep.
And that's also unethical breeders.
My boss texted me in the post, and she's like, and I was like, you can pay me to take that. And she's like, oh, it comes with a snake. I'm like, a snake with who knows what fucking illness or what's wrong with it, how consistently it's eating. It's been kept in this improper enclosure for I don't know how long. And she's like, be nice, it's one of my friends. I'm like, no, my boss is a horse girl. So I was like, listen, if this was a horse being mistreated, you would be upset, wouldn't you? She's like, yeah. I'm like, that's how I feel about a fucking snake.
Yep.
Like,
well, and that's like Dana said, people buying, she asks about enclosures. And, every once in a while I get asked, because I've got a few adult boas that will get rehomed at some point. I'll never take them to an expo, because I guarantee that I will never find a buyer at an expo looking for an adult boa that has an enclosure set up at home ready for it to go home.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I will never take an adult animal like that.
Especially that big one you just got.
Yeah.
Like,
She'll live out her days.
By the way, just saying.
How do you guys suggest quarantining new animals? What do you guys specifically do with your collections? That's a good question.
Separate section of the house, separate enclosure. I've got 3 or 4 quarantine areas in my house, because between rescue animals and animals for breeding, and I've got pets, and my wife has reptiles, and so we've generally, we've got extra bedrooms, we've got hallways as far away from other animals as possible. And for the first month, they don't see substrate. They go on paper towels.
I keep my personal collections in rooms like this. Collection is away in rooms, and it has all its shit set up. New animals are generally in the living room and on paper towel, because with paper towel I can monitor poops. I can see whether it's runny, poops not happening, whatever. You can observe more with your 30, 60, 120 day, whatever quarantine that you want to do. I think if you're actively breeding boas and constantly getting new boas, I absolutely think you should do a 1-year quarantine for new animals, because IBD is fucking scary.
It is, and they can be asymptomatic for so long.
Lie dormant for up 12 months or more. I'm sorry, but is it not? I rather just raise up a boa in a separate area for a year.
I don't think it's just IBD, though. I mean, if you think about it, IBD, it's scary. So it's crypto. So we could name off a dozen diseases, and it depends on pardon the phrasing, but the flavor of the month, the flavor of the year, because it seems like these cycle through. And one year it's IBD, the next year it's crypto, next year it'll be something new. It'll be something.
And then
it'll be a big collection that gets lost.
Is the big thing, and there's animals that can be infected with coronavirus. It's not COVID-19, but they can absolutely get infected with other versions of the virus.
Yeah, there's been around in cows for years.
Yeah, there's a lot of different strains of different viruses. And since we're keeping more exotic animals in the hobby, the more that they're going to come up. And it's not necessarily because you're a shitty keeper. It's because a lot of these things lay dormant in these animals. So something triggers that. Currently, we don't know what it is that triggers some of these things. Is it genetic? Is it something that pops up that's like reoccurring RIs? Is some nidoviruses what they're finding some species of pythons. And it also affects some boas, and it doesn't affect all species of pythons either. So
no, but to put a different spin on it, and something like this is a personal opinion of mine from personal experience, and I don't know if anybody's, I don't even know if anybody would agree with me. But one of the things to consider is that we are keeping these animals in captivity. So all of the animals that are captive bred, we make sure they're free of parasites. We take care of them differently here. The parasitic load on a wild animal, to a degree, actually protects it. And if you think about it, we bring them into a fairly sterile environment that they don't have in the wild. Their environment, where they come from, is not as sterile as what we give them, even on a bad day.
Well, even if you do naturalistic, it's still more sterile than what they have in the wild.
So back to the, my personal experience, and I mean, we're going to talk about humans here for a second, but anybody that's ever heard of MRSA, MRSA, methylcoccin-resistant staph infection, the shit's scary. And what it is it's a superbug. It was created in hospitals. It was created because it was a bug that survived the super sterile environments. It evolved. So these bugs that we're getting in our reptiles, I mean, we are keeping them in sterile environments. They don't have to have the same immune system. They don't have to have that protection that they do in the wild. So they're likely more susceptible to a bug or a superbug or whatever it is that these have evolved from. There's no guarantee that these viruses even came from the wild that we're dealing with. It could have come from the fact that we're trying to take better care of them, and because of that, nature fought back.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't that technically how the animal kingdom works? It's survival of the fittest in the long and short of it, and the itty bittiest little guy seems to be a pretty fucking badass.
Yeah. Jungle always looks really healthy the year after a fire.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, look at all the new growth in Australia. It looks absolutely beautiful. And, it was absolutely devastating in January, and everyone thought it was the end of the world because Australia was on fire. Hi, do you know how much new growth is in Australia? Do you know how forests work? It's literally how forests work.
It's nature's way of
all those animals die.
Yeah,
really
a lot of that growth.
But this is how nature has evolved. Fire creates new life.
Yeah.
Some plants
you said it earlier
can't
too.
produce without fire.
You said it earlier. Not part of breeding is not everything is going to live. And we're in a sterile environment where they don't have to fend for themselves. We are letting animals that survive that probably wouldn't have survived in the wild, whether it be morphs or just weak babies that wouldn't even have hatched.
Well,
and we're creating this environment where they have weak genetics.
Humans used to leave babies that were genetically inferior, deformed, whatever, out to die. And look at how strong humans used to be as a species. Sorry, Vikings were badass. Hi, they left their offspring out to die in the fucking woods if they weren't 100%. That's how it was. And you know what? As an ethical breeder these days, that's what you need to do.
Yep, 100%.
You only breed the strongest, best animals because you're always breeding to better the breed. It's not just a dog and cat thing. It's a breeder, period thing. You always breed to better the breed. And humans really, really fail on that mark because, I'm sorry, people are going to get real fucking mad at me in about 30 seconds and I don't care. But, humans got weak because they got compassionate and started saving all the deformed, whatever, genetically inferior humans. So humans got weak. I'm sorry, we did. If we're always breeding to better the breed, what's wrong?
Yep.
Mice are the same. So when my mice have a litter and one of the babies has something wrong with it, even if it's not visible, they cast that one out. I've spent countless times trying to stuff that baby back in the center of the litter, and then mom will always find that one baby and cast it out.
Well, so we had 2 litters of puppies last year. They're both whoops litters. Don't fucking get mad at me. I got my dog fixed. She just got knocked up before I could afford to get her fixed a second time. Puppy produced. So, but like with the second litter of puppies, there was one puppy kicked off to the side, and I found him cold, and I, warmed him up, and I threw him right in the center, made sure he was latched on a nipple and everything, and guess what? Puppy died within 24 hours.
Yep. They know.
And that was with human intervention, and like my dog was producing milk and everything. But you know what? Some animals just aren't meant to live.
No,
period.
Like I don't think reptiles, really, snakes especially, they don't have that maternal.
Yeah, no. Well, there's certain species that do. Because, like, isn't it red-eyed croc skinks that actually teach their young how to hunt and stuff like that?
Alligators too,
yeah. There's some species of skinks that do that are communal, and they will raise their young and stuff like that. I can't remember.
But like for the most part, reptiles is like, I poop out my eggs, you're born, and life is your problem.
Yeah. That's generally what happens in the wild. Some species do raise their young, do protect them for a certain period of time, but it doesn't happen for all species. So, but yeah.
This is the never-ending Caesar ever.
Am I the only one not drinking here?
It's okay, I drink enough for both of us.
That's right.
We're all 4.
I feel awkward about my electric lettuce on the podcast, so I won't do that, but I feel
it's okay. Chris is sleeping, so
that's
I'd rather be here smoking, but like, I feel like it's a no-no even though it's illegal.
I give no fucks what anyone thinks.
Yeah, I suppose. But the Caesar's great with my homemade pickled garlic, and I think you should all get some for Christmas because it's fucking delicious and makes the best Caesars ever. Cody, that is so true. It says, shit, if the baby doesn't take off, they become a meal for mom or dad. Yes, sorry, but it's true. Like I'd rather an animal, even if it dies because it wasn't thriving, I'd rather its energy get used. I will absolutely try and feed another one of my animals with it. You can look at me as a monster all you want, and I
slug to the.
What am I gonna do? Throw it in the garbage?
That's how I feel about
monitors.
That's why I have king snakes. I mean,
that is literally why I have king snakes.
I love recycling plant at my house.
Circle of life, man. Instead of throwing it in the trash, I feel like such an asshole.
I feel guilty throwing an animal that died in the garbage.
It's such a waste.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I've actually thought about just breeding normal ball pythons because I have king snakes.
People breed ball pythons and cresties as feeders all the time. It's okay.
Absolutely.
Cresties?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would absolutely feed a crestie to my tokay, and I wouldn't feel bad.
Snakes I want, they're probably going to need cresties.
Yeah. Or
I would also breed warning
for the conversation.
If I have normal ball pythons that don't thrive, I'm absolutely going to feed them to my king snake. I'm sorry. I'd rather an animal's life, even if it didn't make it, be used to fulfill a purpose.
I couldn't care less if it was a $10,000 sunset ball python. If
I
it
would
doesn't
still
thrive, I'll feed it to my king snake.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I feel like a literal piece of shit throwing an animal in the garbage. One of my ducks died, and I have it in the freezer to save it because I want to make it a mount at one point.
I have a tarantula in the freezer.
I just feel like I connected with him, even though it's just a fucking duck. But I loved him. He's in my green grass, and I want him to be my house duck. And like now, I just want him to sit on my desk and like look like a bad duck skeleton.
Last year, I skinned a carpet python of mine that got egg bound and had to be put down, and I had her tan.
Yeah.
The rest of her's in the freezer so that I can articulate her, but I had a friend of mine tan her. She's rolled up in the closet so that I can put her up on a lighted display on my wall. I love her. She was gorgeous.
Don't feel like as much of the psycho.
Well,
the contents of my freezer.
I have a Tegu skeleton. The Tegu passed away. Yep. I got the skeleton cleaned and articulated. I made a really great educational display. This animal had MBD because of improper care. So it's one, a great display thing for the public. Two, it just looks great in my house. I'm working on another one because that other animal passed away. And instead of turning them into just ashes, because it was such a large animal, and I want to portray a good image of that animal. It was a great loved pet. And sometimes you have loved pets that you want to turn into pieces of art that you can view every day, or some other stuff like that. Or sometimes it's just an animal that needs to be culled and gets fed off to something else.
I get back to the whole like public knowledge and like not trying to not portray bad parts of the hobby. I had a prized female T-positive blood python at the end of last year pass away. She was egg bound, and I cried so hard. I put her in the freezer because I said, nope, I'm not throwing her out. I want to articulate her. I want to like make it an educational piece. I want to cherish her forever. But like, man, that sucked. That was like a punch right in the chest. Man, I do though. I do. Like, I want to do something cool. I just don't know if I have the guts to do it myself because it was a pet.
When mine was egg bound and we went to the vet and he explained, this is what's going on. This is why she's egg bound. I can remove the egg.
Happy birthday, Vanan.
The vet explained it to me, and he actually videotaped the whole procedure. And I said, I don't want her going to waste. I'm gonna tan her. I'm gonna articulate her. And he actually videotaped the whole thing so that I could show people what happens when snakes get egg bound.
That's cool.
So
that's really
I got to post it on YouTube. He gave me the video, said go ahead and post it, so it's up on YouTube, and you can actually watch the procedure. And he explains what he's doing. He voiceovered it for me.
And that again goes back to us as the keepers. We are getting that information and putting it out there. I'm sorry, but what herpetologist is doing that? Tell me one. Give me one.
Pause this for a moment. It's Vanan's birthday and he's joined the chat.
Hey!
Did you?
Yes. Okay, ready? Let's 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Vanan. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Vanan!
Okay, let's sing a happy birthday.
We're not singing him happy birthday.
I'll come with her sing.
You smell like snake poo.
Leave the podcast.
I don't know, probably. But yeah, Vanan's been a big supporter of us since
this show would not have happened without him at all, period, and his constant encouragement. He
gave us music and everything too, so like
our intro song is Vanan's band, Naraka, which he's the lead singer of.
Like, that's cool, but the fact is we were talking about positive influences and like improving our image. He goes out of his way to stick himself in the public eye, even when people disagree with him. He is willing to be out there and be the person getting yelled at for an opinion that maybe not everybody agrees with.
Vanan, you're the best breeder in the world. No one's better than you.
100%. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to watch any of Vanan's videos about advancing keeping and stuff.
Like,
just incredible.
Trying new things and putting the information out there.
Yeah.
Like
it takes balls to stick your neck out there when
I think Vanan really stepped up. Absolutely. Like him trying to hibernate all his kings together over the winter.
Yes.
That is literally
hibernation.
A huge stepping stone for us advancing our herpetoculture.
He also took a lot of trash for that too.
Yep. But it works for some species and it doesn't work for all species. And that's what people got to remember.
Exactly.
Vinan says he doesn't think it did much for my public image. Yeah, which may be true, but like the keepers like us that actually understand that it's a movement forwards, we appreciate it and we understand what it does for the hobby.
It may not have done a lot for your public image, but at the same time, it did a lot to further it. You're constantly working to better things.
You're
Whether
not
it's
a Ron
bettering
Billings
everybody's morale. You know, you're either bettering people's morale or you're furthering educational or whatever it is. It's still a positive image you're putting forth. It's still something good for the hobby. And that's more than can be said for 99% of keepers.
It's another form of research.
Literally, that's it. We are
all of us do that on our own in our own way.
It might not be the scientific research, and not all research is entirely scientific based, but there is some science behind it. But it might not be textbook university based science where we're doing PCR tests on DNA and all this other kind of stuff. But it does help further the hobby, and it does help people care for these animals.
It's okay, Vinan. We like stirring the pot here, especially me. Vinan tells me, or Brandon tells me to stop stirring sometimes, and I won't.
Oh, I'll be the first person to go off on somebody when they're being an idiot. I don't care if anybody dislikes me. I'm not here for a single one of you. I'm here for the animals, and I love this hobby.
I had someone that's known for killing animals tell me it was the worst thing to happen to the hobby. I was like, whatever, bud. You know what? You're literally known as an animal killer. I'm not concerned about your opinion.
You guys saw the messages that I got yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. And like clearly that guy had no idea who you were or what you do to help animals on a regular basis and like the rescue efforts you do. Like you aren't just a breeder. You are also a board member of BCRC. And you actually participate in the rescue efforts.
If he would, and that's just it. I'm like I said earlier, I'm not going to get into dick measuring with the guy, but you know, if you're not going to step up and educate yourself on the people you're talking to, why should I believe that you're educating yourself on the animals that you claim to be saving?
Yeah,
exactly. Like,
I think
telling you that you know how to take care of them, but you don't know how to talk to another human being.
And a lot of the animosity and like online shit flinging, I think people are very quick to learn to disregard what matters the most, and that's the animals. It's not about whether or not you like me or you agree with my opinion or how I do things. It's about the animals at the end of the day, and that comes back to doing the best that we can do in our situations.
Like the biggest thing I see is like, I'm gonna go back to ball pythons again, is the whole my ball python won't eat and it's in a fucking fish tank. So everyone jumps on that person, freaking the fuck out at them, and they get total information overload. So you know what my very first step is with those people? Do you have a heat gun? No? Yes. Can you go buy a heat gun? And that is literally step number 1 for us.
Or thermostat.
Tell me what your exact temperatures are, and then I can literally eliminate half the fucking issues based on what your temperatures are.
Tell me your temps, your humidity, and send me a picture of your enclosure.
Yeah, exactly. And literally work on it one single issue at a time. You can't tell someone to change their entire closure at once and tell them everything that's wrong with it. You can't. It's information overload, and it's not fucking helpful. You have to address it one single issue at a time and slowly get them from a shitty keeper to an educated keeper. Well, none of us went that overnight. None of us did.
It would also help if people quit saying my temperatures are fine.
Perfect. Your temperatures are perfect. Give me a number.
They're not fine. Every single time I have asked that question and got that response, they are not
too
fine.
Low.
Haven't you ever seen the picture I did of the Accurite that says fine and good?
I did.
My temperatures are fine by my stick-on thermostat on the wall of my glass enclosure, so it's taking ambient temperatures.
People don't have thermostats. So my biggest point that I push, so every time someone inquires about an animal, I say, do you have a proper enclosure setup? A thermostat is a necessity. It is not a luxury. It is not maybe I'll get one of those. No, you need a thermostat. In order to keep a cold-blooded reptile, you need to provide a heat source. It needs to be on a thermostat.
Because it needs to be regulated.
And I seriously cannot, I try not to get upset with people. I try to educate first, but sometimes people just don't receive information very well.
We have one person in Alberta Reptiles, like my Facebook group, that's having a lot of issues. And they finally started offering live. And it's like, hey, okay, then we at least got your snake eating. Now let's find one more issue and address that one issue. So we've got the animal eating. We're getting this next issue rectified. Okay, cool. That issue's rectified. Now let's move on to the next one. And eventually you're going to get a well-rounded fucking keeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to take time and dedication to get
and they'll be able to see why this wasn't working before. They'll be able to see those differences as they progress their keeping.
Yeah.
I was talking to a guy yesterday, messaged me on my business page, and I'm asking about my carpet python, and I want to know what it is, and I walked him through it, why they're mutts, and why do you say feeding bin? You don't need to move it to feed, and I explained to him why and walked him through stuff, and he said it's a lot of information to process if you ask this stuff publicly, and I told him the same thing I told everybody else. If you can't deal with the group, shoot me a message on my personal page, a message on my business page, whatever. I will walk you through it. I will sit up till 2:00 in the morning typing responses if I can possibly help. And
Absolutely.
if I can't help, I will send you to the person that can.
Yes.
Because I guarantee that I guarantee there is no one that is keeping a species that I don't know someone that can help them if they're stuck.
Absolutely. I feel the exact same way.
That offer always stands. The guy that went off on me about horrible, horrible breeders of the devil, I still tried to you need to educate yourself, and I'll be polite and I will be nice and I will try to help. I don't care. You want to attack me, fine. But for the people that don't want to, be berated like that publicly, they could message me. They could message CHP page.
Yep.
They could message Dana. There are people out there that are willing to help, because the beratement publicly is back to it's no good for the public image of the hobby.
The only time I'm not willing to help
better.
someone is when they're not willing to listen.
Yeah, it's hard.
Then I'm going to be a fucking asshole. And I'm not
I'm
going to
an asshole. I'm done. I'm not wasting my time. If you're going to, if I ask you for specific information, you answer with fine and good, and then use the phrase, well, it's worked for me for the last 8 years.
Or I
don't care if it's worked for 8 years. It's wrong.
Yeah.
I will explain to you scientifically or whatever it takes as to why it's wrong. No, you should not have to mist your boa constrictor 3 times a day.
No, that's
your substrate is garbage. Your enclosure sucks.
You do not need to dust your rodents with calcium and supplements for your ball python.
Right.
I got that question. It was great.
And even beyond that, even if it's worked for 8 years, everything evolves because we work hard to evolve the hobby. So if something is evolved, maybe 20 years ago, feeding bins were normal. We don't use feeding bins anymore unless it's
years ago. It was fine to keep your animal with an incandescent bulb.
Yeah.
Well, and there's really no question is a stupid question. If you don't know, it's better to ask than to just, think that this is the right way. I would much rather somebody ask me a question, and even if I don't have the answer, yeah, absolutely, same thing. I'll point you in the right direction to someone that I think is more knowledgeable.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people are hesitant to ask because they don't want to ask breeders because they think that, well, I'm not buying anything off you. Why would you help me?
A lot of my questions are from people that have never bought an animal from me. They just heard about me, or they met me at an expo and remembered that I said they could message me with a question.
Yep.
And I love that. It's great because it knows that it helps me realize that I'm getting that point across that I want to be. I'm not just a breeder. I'm not just a puppy mill breeder, backyard. I don't keep all my ball pythons in a bunch of racks and try to get as much money out of them as I can. I generally care about the animals, and I want to see them do well, even if they're not my own animals.
Yeah, I don't care if you bought from me or if you ever bought from me or whatever the story is. If I can possibly help, like seriously, if I'm sitting on the couch, I'm watching TV, I'm on my coffee break at lunch, and I can type up a response, it costs me nothing to help. Yep. And I am always willing to.
Yep.
Like I'm not going to drop my work and run off and save your life. You're going to have to deal with, I will get back to you as soon as I can, but I guarantee you I will get back to you. Mm-hmm. I want to help.
Caitlin says, I think people are so hesitant to ask because they don't want to ridicule or get called stupid. I see it in public groups all the time. Absolutely.
Social media is hard.
Because for every one person that actually wants to help the person asking the question, there's going to be 10, 15 people saying, You're a bad keeper, you're doing things wrong, and they're just going to berate them.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly what I said. If somebody's feeling that way, message one of us.
Yep.
Message one of us. One of us will help you 100%.
And that's one of the points of the podcast too, is we want to portray as much good information from herpetologists, keepers, vets, everybody in the animal keeping field. So it really helps.
Oh, sorry, I had a moment there.
Vanessa said you can pick out the true animal folk pretty fast after a while. Absolutely. Because the people who will want to benefit the animals versus just, hey, I got this one ball python that I've been keeping for 3 months and I know everything. There's people out there who actually want to help people.
Passion's pretty powerful.
Yep. Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that people don't agree with on the internet, and it's because I live in Calgary, Alberta, and somebody in Florida keeps their animals differently than I, so that's something that's they're not going to agree on.
Brandon and I were talking earlier about how care sheets and care guides are really just blanket guide statements. Like, I have a general maintenance guideline that I post on my business page, and literally, like, it works for some, but it's not going to work for the next person. What I do in my snake room is going to be entirely have a different effect on what somebody else does in theirs. And so we were discussing this, like there's no one size fits all when it comes to care requirements.
Yeah.
And that's just it. Like, we're back to elevation. Like, you guys are what, at a couple thousand feet elevation? I'm at about 30.
Yeah, and you have way more humidity. You have way more humidity.
If I drive 3 miles from my house, I am sitting on the beach on the ocean.
Yeah, I know. My home.
So like you have way more humidity. We have 16% humidity, like 30%.
My ambient humidity in my house is right around 40%, which still isn't high enough for a lot of the species I keep.
No, but
it's a whole lot easier to keep them. But the elevation, it just changes so much.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it is different here. Being on the island, I can tell you, I grew up in Alberta. I dealt with minus 40, but 0 degrees on the island is freezing.
Yeah, because
I'll go back to Alberta, and minus 30 is fine.
Humidity, it gets in your bones, man. I'm an island girl, and I seriously, people out here, they just don't understand that. No, like 30 degrees here is boiling hot, and 0 degrees is I'm not getting out of bed. Like mucky, muggy hot, like you can't breathe. Yeah. It's sticking in the air sticks to your lungs. Yeah. And here 30 degrees is usually pretty dry.
Yeah.
Right around here, no matter what temperature it is.
Well, yeah.
You want to be misted?
I'd love to be misted.
Hang on. I'll spray one.
Oh, sorry, we have a peanut gallery in the bag.
Autumn says she loves your big snake, Chris.
Your wife's a fucking gem.
I love her.
It's okay. My husband's making inappropriate comments back here too.
I've never met her.
We got a peanut gallery on the couch on screen too. So
Autumn, you're my people.
Quit showing off your battery back there.
After this, what you done to her? Your teacher cut off. I've been cut off 3 times.
Caitlin says, okay, so we're talking about care, but for the people that enjoy building glam enclosures, one major one I see is bearded dragons getting blankets, pillows, and beds. And I don't even want to go there.
People.
Can I not?
Okay.
People. I'll go there. They're stupid. They're stupid.
Kiana, if the needs of the animal are being met, everything else is for us. If you can meet that bearded dragon's needs and put the couch and the blankets and stuff in there, fine. But if you're going to put it on paper towel and you're going to trash the entire enclosure just to put a couch in, you are garbage people.
Okay, I will give you that, but then you have to take into precautions that bearded dragons are covered in spikes, they have nails, all that shit. And, like, I see so many fabrics that are actually getting caught on the animals.
And bacteria.
Yeah.
Bacteria is a huge issue.
That's why people don't really use reptile carpet anymore, because it harbors bacteria. So when they take a shit on there and the animal's got coccidia, it's going to keep getting it all the time because you're not completely sanitizing that environment because of the soft fabrics.
But if you made a little plastic couch and you made it all pretty like a Barbie doll house, if you can meet the care of the animal, everything else is aesthetics and it's for us.
Fine.
I don't care what people do, but you're right. Like if a cloth couch is harboring bacteria, yes, you're right. That's not meeting the needs. I don't care what anybody keeps them in as long as their animals' needs are met.
Yeah. I've seen a corn snake enclosure. I have pictures saved on my phone. I'll try and dig them up. It's a corn snake enclosure full of complete, like, household stuff. Yep. So there's, like, bottles of cleaner, which have been, like, cleaned. And so, like, they're not toxic to the animal. But it has, like, mop buckets, sponges, teapots that are actually secretly humid highs. And, like, it was a total, like, what if a snake came into your basement and lived there and, like, found a box full of shit. That's literally what this animal's enclosure was. And it met the animal's needs in every which way. There's nothing you could say that was wrong with the enclosure other than you're like, oh, it's not what I want to see. That's it. Right? Like, if you're going the extra mile and giving the animal all those, like, bells and whistles, you expect to see a naturalistic environment full of, like, moss and branches and stuff like that, not full of, like, mop buckets and sponges.
Yep.
Both are completely applicable.
Yes.
They are. One was, like, mortifying to me to, like, see visually, but, like, it was really, really cool that someone put in the effort to, like, do all that and still give the animal all its requirements in a completely new artistic way.
Yeah.
But if you replace mop bucket with couch, you're suddenly disgusted.
Yeah. How often are beardies anthropomorphized?
That's his basket dropped off my car.
I've never heard of anyone booping the snoot on a beardie.
But how often are beardies treated like dolls and babies? Because that's what I see is beardies treated like dolls.
Yeah.
They're not. They're a fucking reptile. They're a reptile that actually has venom glands.
Yeah.
Your beardie, it's got venom. Just saying.
Anyways, we probably could take this episode for another while, and I got to get going. My wife is getting on me.
Are you guys coming back tonight?
Tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
But we got other family to go visit and stuff like that too, so got some other stuff to do.
My children are trashing my basement currently. Sounds wonderful.
So we all should probably get back to some of these adult things that we got to deal with too.
Sip, sip.
That too.
So thanks for tuning in to another episode.
Hold on. Dana, where do we find you online?
Oh yeah, I'm fucking missing shit.
Ophidians by Design, Facebook and Instagram, or my website, ophidiansbydesign.com. which doesn't get updated very often, I have to say. But I'm there.
Chris, where do we find you?
That way.
Crown pythons everywhere. Hold on, throw Banana's comment back up there.
Oh yeah, I can do that too. You also can find Chris here.
Yeah.
How would we feel if we tossed natural branches and went with plastic tunnels and climbing gear? Just give the animal what it fucking needs.
Yeah.
Just give the animal what it fucking needs. I don't care how you get the job done. Just get
Emerald
it done.
tree boas. Emerald tree boas are PVC climbing apparatuses all the time.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with it.
Meet the animal's needs. Please.
And if we're running away, Vannon, I hope you have an amazing birthday.
Don't forget to grab life by the hemi beans tonight, Van.
Yeah, cheers, my dude. We love you.
Yeah, don't grab any hemi beans.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Don't forget to grab life by the hemi fiends. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that other fun stuff. Podbean.
Google us. I'm sure you'll find us.
Yeah. Have a good night.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.